I'm Dan Jones. Welcome to Interchange. Thank you for joining us. We have lots of things to talk about again today. Presidential politics. Donald Trump, with another primary win, stays on top in the polls. Do you see that changing at all? We'll talk about the latest Marquette University poll that shows the race for Wisconsin Supreme Court is neck and neck, but in the race for United States Senate, Russ Feingold remains out in front. And we'll talk about whether City of Milwaukee employees will once again be forced to live in the city of Milwaukee. Okay, before we get going, let me introduce everybody. You all know longtime newspaper columnist Joel McNally. Kevin Fischer, who spent many years here as a broadcast journalist, many years after that as a legislative staffer over in Madison. Denise Callaway, former TV news reporter, now a communications and public relations professional. And of course, Gerard, Randall, education and job creation consultant. Rick Horowitz is going to be along with commentary at the end of the show. All right, let's talk first about presidential politics. Trump still on top. Super Tuesday primaries right around the corner. If he does well on Tuesday, is he one huge step closer to being the nominee? And after that debate Thursday night, wow, that was crazy. Chris Christie comes out in support of him today. So I have to ask you, I know I've asked you this a million times. You've stated there is no way he's getting the nomination.
There is no way he's getting the nomination. He doesn't get beyond a third. The people who are anti-Trump in the party are just as solidly anti-Trump as those who support him are pro-Trump. I think our issue has been getting those who are anti-Trump to coalesce around one candidate. So in the Super Tuesday races that you have coming up, Texas is among them. Cruz is expected to win that. Even though Rubio is not leading in Florida, that's a good 2 weeks away. I fully expect that he'll win Florida. Kasich, if he's still in the race come Ohio, will take Ohio. It's really a changing dynamic, but it's not changing to favor Donald Trump. The change is going to happen as more and more of these candidates drop out and people begin to coalesce around a single candidate to take Trump on. And I think Rubio did a more than credible job of that yesterday. He and Cruz tag team Trump. They kind of set Trump on his heels. And I think a lot of people who are anti-Trump had an opportunity to see with good reason why Trump should not be the candidate for the Republican Party.
I take this rare opportunity to disagree with my good friend Gerard, because I too at one time on this very program said there is no way possible that Donald Trump could get the nomination. But it's starting to look now. It's starting to appear that he has the inside track. You look at next week, Super Tuesday, 12 states, Donald Trump is polling ahead in 8 of those states. And you're not going to shake the Trump people. You tell them, well, Donald Trump is liberal on this, doesn't matter. Donald Trump is liberal on that, doesn't matter. You can't persuade them.
Right.
All right. You are correct that the anti-Trump people are just as loyal in their opposition to Donald Trump. And I was so happy that finally some conventional wisdom played through in this campaign during the Thursday debate. When you're behind, you go after the person who's in front. Yes. Republicans, shame on them, have not been doing that. They've been beating up on each other, and Donald Trump has been, soaking up the gravy. Well, last night, they went after him. And I think that will, maybe in the long run, hopefully in the short run, show the vast majority of Republican voters, 65 to 70% who do not like Donald Trump, that this man is not fit for the presidency, which Chris Christie said numerous times, and then in the bizarro world of this election today came out and endorsed him. So I don't think anybody can predict what's going to happen, but at the moment, and I hate to say it, it looks like Donald Trump is building momentum.
So will you support him when he's the nominee?
If he's the nominee, no, I will not. I will tell you this: I will show up in November on election day.
I want to hear.
I want to hear
Republicans.
Vote for all the other conservative.
I want to hear more Republicans say that, because with this racist, ugly candidate winning the nomination in the party, responsible Republicans are going to have to say exactly what you just said. And I don't see them saying it. Well, Chris Christie proved it today. Chris Christie was calling Donald Trump incompetent and not fit to be president until he endorsed him today, hoping to become his vice president.
And Christie said today what I found interesting, he said, this guy is completely changing the playbook of politics in the United States.
Let me tell you, can I explain what I think is going on? And I think Republicans have resolved the fact that he's going to win the nomination. That's why neither Rubio nor Cruz are going to get out. And
well, they're fighting for second place.
Well, yeah, but it's always second or third. And let me tell you the other thing they're fighting for. Let me tell you the other thing they're fighting for. Let me tell you the other thing they're fighting for. They're fighting for the nomination in 4 years. They're both young. They both see themselves as the next Republican candidate. They see they can't win, and they don't think the Republicans. They don't think Republicans are going to win this. Well, if you don't support the Republican nominee, and if Gerard does it, exactly, why should intelligent Republicans support the most ridiculous, racist, hateful candidate?
But then why does he keep on winning?
He keeps on winning, and this is really interesting. I actually heard an interview with someone who was a Donald Trump supporter. And this person said, I think he's an idiot. I think he's repugnant in some of the things that he says. But you know what? He's saying the things that a lot of us are thinking. And I think that's why some people, and it's ugly. And I think that's why some people support him. He is seen as being someone who is also very successible. If he releases his tax returns ever, we'll find out whether or not he's as successful as he claims.
Something in there.
He is. But I think that people vote for him because there is a certain amount of dissatisfaction with Washington, with people who are seen as political insiders and people who've been in the know, and they want somebody who's going to be different. I don't think you want somebody as different as Donald Trump, though, and I think that's the problem. And if you take a look at the Marquette poll, I know we're going to talk about in a minute for the race for the Supreme Court, but if you take a look at the Marquette poll, he can't beat anybody. He doesn't beat Hillary, and he doesn't beat Bernie Sanders, at least in Wisconsin.
Does it show you? We sit here week after week talking about how we're shocked and how Donald Trump may implode, and he doesn't. Does it show you though that maybe we and people in the media and people in academia are completely out of touch with how the average American feels?
And that's what a governor from the South said on National Public Radio this week, that we have underestimated how angry the populace is in this country, and we have underestimated, and I'm not complimenting Trump here, but we have underestimated just how powerful he is in this campaign, and his, maybe not powerful is the word, but his abilities to run a campaign, which we call buffoonery, but it's working.
But I don't think he's running a campaign. I think what he is he's peddling very common, very base, very, in most cases, disgusting things that appeal to people's lowest common denominator. I mean, that's what it is.
Which 70% of Republicans detest.
But he appeals to fear. He appeals to people getting something that they think somebody else is going to take from them, or that someone got that they didn't take.
But that's what Republicans have always done. And let me tell you this, when you say 70% oppose him, Jeb Bush dropped out, the most anti-Trump candidate until Rubio decided to get anti-Trump. He dropped out, and Donald Trump's vote went up in Nevada. He got, you've been saying 30% of the vote, he got more than 40% after Jeb Bush dropped out.
40,000 people. Let me make this point. The people who go to conventions are the deepest loyalists to the party that you can have. There's no way those folks are going to go in and commit to Donald Trump.
Plus,
if he wins the delegates, they have to vote for him.
But you all are all assuming
exactly
that there are so many stopgap measures that would prevent a Donald Trump from becoming the nominee of the party. I'm not worried about it. And I guarantee that Rubio will be the nominee of the party in July.
Gerard, if that happens and people feel like they have voted in the Republican primaries for Donald Trump and the Republicans don't honor that,
they were Democrats
then whoever
anyhow.
they put up,
they were Democrats anyhow.
I don't think so.
And we never would have had that.
They were hateful Republicans drawn to racism.
Don't blame that on the Republicans. You blame that on the tenets of what Trump has been out there advocating, which is Democratic policy, not Republican policy.
It is not Democratic policy to build a wall between Mexico and the United States. That is not Democratic policy.
To bar Muslims from the U.S.
He's y'all's. Whether or not you want him, he's yours and you got him.
All right, we're
got
gonna
it. Sure.
Not a liberal.
we're gonna move on to the next topic. The latest poll from Marquette University shows that the
Sorry,
Supreme
not a
Court
conservative, I'm sorry.
the Supreme Court race between Rebecca Bradley and Joanne Kloppenburg is neck and neck right now. The poll also shows that right now, at least, Russ Feingold is favored to take his old job back from Senator Ron Johnson. What do you see changing in the weeks ahead? Anything?
Not very much. I agree that Feingold is going to beat Ron Johnson. And in fact, having a terrible Republican candidate like Donald Trump will help that happen. It not only helps Hillary get elected president, it helps the Democrats take back the Senate. That means if you're waiting for Hillary to nominate the next Supreme Court justice, she's even going to have a Democratic Senate in order to approve it. So the race for the Supreme Court, Joanne Kloppenburg has been, you know, she's a familiar name. She ran before. She almost beat. She almost beat David Prosser, a very ugly justice that's on the court. And then she won an election to the appeals court. And now she's with good credentials and background running for the Supreme Court. And her opponent is this child who has never served as a judge, even though she's been appointed to three judgeships.
Background.
To three judgeships with absolutely no qualifications and no experience by Scott Walker.
And then she
Are both of these races going to just attract millions of
Well,
dollars?
I think first off, you have to keep in mind that one race is coming up in about 5 weeks. The other race is November. In the Kloppenburg-Bradley race, I think what you will see are millions of dollars coming in on both sides. I don't see either party having taken the race lightly. I give the advantage to some degree to Kloppenburg and the organizations that will be out to boost voter turnout in the April elections. But I also know that it will be a test of the Republican machinery to move Bradley out in front. And with all of the network of volunteers that the Republicans have begun to put in place for the presidential elections, they're looking at this as a way of their being able to identify voters and get those voters out early on. With the Feingold race, that's going to be totally contingent on who the nominees are of the various parties and how much effort will be made to produce voter turnout for the presidential races. So I do think that the race between Feingold and Johnson will be more closely tied to the candidates' coattails for president than the race here in the spring between Kloppenburg and Bradley.
Does the fact that Bradley has been tied so closely to Walker and Walker has such huge negatives right now, does that end up hurting her in the election?
Of course. It certainly does. You know, the only reason she is a judge now is because he's appointed her 3 different times. I do think the other thing that we have to take a look at is who, because that race was so close between them in the primary, is where are Donald supporters going to go? And they're not likely to go to Bradley. They're much more likely to go to Kloppenburg. So I would give her the edge. I also think that come April, I believe it's still going to be a very interesting race for Democrats. And the one thing that we have seen is that Bernie Sanders has an ability, particularly when you look in a state like Wisconsin, to really draw people out. And I think he's going to draw a lot of people out. Hillary's going to draw her folks out. And again, I think that helps Joanne Kloppenburg. I think that the only way that Joanne Kloppenburg loses is if, for whatever reason, there's not a competitive race in the Democratic Party. But I don't think that's going to happen because Sanders has clearly indicated that he's going to be in it. And I do think that those negatives from Scott Walker, I would expect to see some ads very soon that begin to tie her, Bradley, very closely to Walker. And that certainly is going to be a big negative for her.
Kevin, what happens in that race, do you think?
Well, I sit here in amazement that Joel and Denise think that come April, only the Democrats are going to get their people out, and we're just going to sit home and not be engaged and not be involved. Of course the conservatives are going to be out there because they too are jazzed.
If Donald Trump's already won the nomination.
Let me tell you, we just discussed that. If you want to talk about the state Supreme Court race, the Republicans got to get Bradley out of southeastern Wisconsin more and get her out statewide. Right. Kloppenburg has a name recognition statewide, but there are a fair number of people who admit they don't know much about her, and she was rejected in her last statewide election. And then, of course, you have to change the tone of the campaign. I'm not saying get dirty or get negative, but you have to frame the campaign about Kloppenburg's judicial philosophies. And in this state, which traditionally is not, very conservative or Republican, but when it comes to judicial races, including the state Supreme Court races, the electorate has traditionally voted for candidates who are considered to be tough on crime, law and order individuals. And that's where I think Bradley will have the advantage. I think she wins. It will be close, but I think she pulls it out.
Do you see any surprises?
Not on our side. I think the folks over there are going to be quite a bit surprised.
Yeah, I mean, the problem, the challenge for the Kloppenburg campaign, if you're going to run on record, is that Bradley doesn't really have a record to run on. And maybe that's one of the things that you point out. She has been appointed. No one has ever, I'm sorry, I'm going to take that back. She has been appointed to those positions that she has served in. And she really doesn't have much of a record. My gosh, when she was asked to produce her calendar for the work that she had done to reporters, she gave them a blank slate. I just think that people are going to want someone, particularly with the attitude that exists on this Supreme Court. Unfortunately, they're going to want somebody who they're going to see is going to not be partisan. They're going to want somebody who doesn't appear to be tied closely to the governor. And if that's what you want, and I think that is what people do want, then it's Kloppenburg.
Well, if your whole campaign is wired around, Scott Walker likes her, you're going to have more substance in that campaign.
Well, I think
41 sheriffs endorse Bradley. 14 district attorneys statewide support Bradley. She is going to run as the better candidate, law and order wise.
That's 65 votes that she has. Okay.
All right.
67.
67. All right. Thank you.
We move on. Next topic. Well, the Wisconsin Supreme Court heard arguments this week about the 2013 state law, which stopped the city of Milwaukee from forcing city employees to live in the city of Milwaukee, as had been the case for nearly 80 years. But the city says if it wins this case, it will once again force people who get a paycheck from the city of Milwaukee to live in the city of Milwaukee and not out in some suburb. Who should win this case and why?
Well, I've always been an advocate of residency requirements for city of Milwaukee. Employees that have jobs that involve the public safety, and this in particular involves firefighters and policemen. So there has to be some compelling reason in order to impose a residency requirement, and I think the city has the ability to make a good case for why firefighters and police officers ought to live either within the city limits or close enough to the city to be able to respond to emergencies when they arise. We've already had the experience of other other employees that are non-emergency responders living outside of the city, and I don't know that we've been hurt as much as we thought we'd be hurt. Particularly in the case with school teachers. The case had been made that school teachers, that pool was so small that we needed to expand it to other communities so that we could attract more capable educators into the city. So I'm still in favor of having a residency requirement for those who live in the city and for those who are emergency responders. And I do think that's where the court will come down.
City or not, Denise, should any employer be able to tell the employee, this is where you're going to live?
In the ideal world, perhaps not, but people knew it was a condition of employment, that they would have to live within the city of Milwaukee. But I think Gerard brings up a point that we do have to take a look at. We do have an example now of Milwaukee Public Schools where people are no longer required to live in the city of Milwaukee.
Bravo to that.
And what happens is, I think that, certainly there are some concerns about what it does to the city and perhaps what it does to the tax base. But it also takes a look at that employment pool. You have people who are now working for Milwaukee Public Schools who were interested in doing so, but who couldn't before because of the residency requirement, and they had purchased a home, they didn't want to sell the home, they didn't want to take a loss, whatever the reason was. And so, I think we do need to consider the fact that there are occasions where not having a residency rule opens up a talent pool that you would not have otherwise. It makes it more competitive. And I do think that most communities who have any kind of residency requirements require those emergency responders to live within a certain number of miles of the city. And I think that's something that's very, very reasonable. The other side of it is you don't want to lose good people because they feel they're trapped being in a city or living in a community where they don't want to live. If you value the talent, you have to figure out a way to do one of two things. Either come to a compromise on this or find yourself in a situation where you're going to lose good talent because people feel like that's something that's critically important to them, living where they want to live, and they're not able to do it.
Mayor Tom Barrett, Kevin, has said repeatedly he worries about this because he thinks too many people would move out of the city.
Yeah, we'll be Detroit, I think he said, which was a ridiculous assertion. When we hire our police officers and our firefighters, we hire them to do a service. We don't hire them for their zip code. And they really should be allowed in America. You should be allowed to live where you want to live. I support strongly the residency rule. I think, though, that there is a possibility that we'll get shot down because those that argue in favor of it say the residency rule has statewide impact, which you could argue it does not, because not every community in the state has such restrictions.
One of only a handful of communities.
So I would not be surprised if the police officers and firefighters lose this battle, and then what happens? The city disrupts the lives of hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people who will have to somehow move back within the city limits. Denise nailed it. The word is reasonable. I think having a situation, a compromise, which is in effect now but may not be if the case goes a certain way, that they live within 15 miles of the city. I think, as you stated, Denise, that is reasonable.
Well, okay, 1 minute only. You live in the city. Do you care if the guy who picks up your garbage or plows your street lives in the city too?
No, but I care about police officers and firefighters. I loathe the idea of white suburban residents getting police jobs to police a majority black city. That it makes the police an outside occupying army in black communities. And there's too much of that as an image of the police department. However, interesting the way all these ideologies converge here, because I do believe that your employer shouldn't be able to tell you where to live. But I think, as Gerard said, public safety services, that kind of thing, that is an exception that I carve out. But I think your job is to do the best job you can for your employer, and your employer doesn't have a right to tell you who to marry and then who to move in with or anything else. That's your personal life.
All right, we continue. Well, if we've learned anything from these past few years, it's that political fights can really bring out the animal in some people. And when it comes to the struggles between President Obama and the Republican-led Congress, well, there's one particular animal that's been getting a lot of attention lately. Rick Horowitz explains. Rick.
Hey, welcome to the White House Office of Congressional Relations. Pull up a chair. We're not exactly overworked these days. After all, the gentlemen who run Congress have made it pretty clear they're not much interested in having relations with this White House, with this president. You saw just how non-interested they are, right, with all their fussing over filling that new Supreme Court vacancy. Amazing. But hey, it means I make it home for dinner most nights. And while I'm here, plenty of time to daydream, to fantasize. Call on line 1 for Mitch McConnell. Sure. Good afternoon, Mr. Leader. How you doing today? How's that? No. We saw it on the Weather Channel. We didn't realize it had. So, how many touchdowns in Kentucky? Oh my, sounds pretty awful. Glad nobody was. No, plenty of rebuilding. Absolutely. You're going to have your hands. How's that? A presidential disaster declaration? I don't. No, I'm sure it's serious. It's just, well, I'm not sure the president can do that, make that kind of decision, I mean, being a lame duck and all. Say again? Yeah, till next January 20, sure. But you know how lame ducks? How's that? Yeah, mosquitoes in all the standing water. Got it. Yeah, okay. But no, absolutely. I'd be scared too. A Zika vaccine would be great if the CDC could step up and. No, you know, I don't know. Maybe the next president can push them on that. You know, instead of some lame duck with just 11 months. What else? Locusts landing in Louisville? Bowling balls exploding in Bowling Green? No, it certainly could be terrorists. Could be ISIS. Absolutely. But see, any troops the president deploys now to deal with it could still be their way after he leaves office. And, you know, seeing he's a lame duck and all. And I know how much you hate lame ducks making decisions that outlast the. Hello? Hello? Hung up on me. Like I said, though, plenty of time to fantasize.
All right. Thanks, Rick, and thank you so very much for watching. Enjoy the rest of your weekend.